The New York City chapter of the Historical Novel Society presents this recording from January 25th, 2025. Susan Wands moderates our international open mic for historical fiction authors. 11 members join her in a Zoom meeting, reading excerpts from their published books. The historical times and places range from 1st century Rome to 1940s Norway, with stops in 6th century Peru, 10th century Spain, turn of the 20th century Far East and Paris, plus many more. A Q&A with each author covering topics such as their research, character development, and the writing process follows the readings. Information about our chapter is available at our website link listed in the description. Our readers, their works, and links are also listed in the description in the order they read. Thank you and enjoy the program.
All right, then. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the New York City chapter of the Historical Novel Society, and we are having an open mic. And to kick off our proceedings, I'm Susan Wands. I'm a co-chair of the group. I'm going to introduce you to our chair, Loretta Goldberg. Go ahead, Loretta, take it away.
And it had always been our previous chair's Faith Justice to have an open mic international program. Today is our first adventure. I plead guilty to selecting the readers today, and I think it's going to be a very fun event. We exist as a New York chapter to bring programs about authors and craft and industry to our members who are authors, readers, and industry professionals. We're all volunteers. And there's no charge to joining our group. Our next two meetings in February, we're going to feature two authors who write about true historical figures. The first one is going to be the real Macbeth, not Shakespeare's version, and some figures from ancient Rome. And the March is going to be editing from the 5 E's Editors Collective, which is a group of superb professional developmental editors that a number of us have worked with, and they go back very, very many years. So those are our next two programs. Our programs are recorded. They go into our archives. They're always available if you miss the meeting. So take it away, Susan.
Great. Thank you, Loretta. Well, our very first guest is going to be Jessica. Jessica, I'm going to pin you. Yes, Jessica is calling from Spain. And if you could start when I say go, you will have your 3 minutes and you can do an introduction and read from your book. All right, Jessica, take it away.
Hello. Our Lady's Troubadour is a collection of 10 stories based on the 13th century Cantigas de Santa Maria, which are miracle tales. In this story, which is set in Le Puy-en-Velay in France, Cataline has an abusive husband. While he's away on a business trip, she gets help from her friends, but now he's returned. When he sees us, he stops short, but quickly gathers his thoughts. Where have you been? Why haven't you prepared this wool for the mayor? My legs are wooden posts because of the fear I feel before the look in his eyes. What happened to his love? How did I lose it? How can I get it back? I can't survive with a husband who hates me. It would almost be better to be alone in the world. Aimée grabs my hand and tosses her head back. Cataline has a question for you too, she says to Raoul. Oh, what would that be? He raises his fists, responding to an unknown challenge. I take a deep breath and cross myself, trusting the Mother of God. As long as Raoul stays across the room, I can do this. Husband, I would like to know if you think people who have committed no crime should be punished. He drops his fists and cocks his head. Why do you ask? Because I see that you are very angry with me, and it frightens me. I desire nothing so much as to know why. I blink to hold in the tears. He crosses to me and reaches for my hands, but I don't let him take them. I've been told by trustworthy men that you do me great wrong. What men were these? Asks Isabeau. Who did they say she wronged you with? And when did they tell you these lies? My husband ignores her. I'd rather be dead than have a wife like that. I can never forgive such a thing. May ill fortune befall all who dishonor their husbands. I'm not one of those women. May God give you the strength to endure such a false accusation, says Aimee. I nod, taking comfort in the way she, her sister, and their mother stand between me and Raoul. I've never wronged you, nor would I ever. I'll do anything to prove my innocence. I think of all the possible trials by ordeal. I choose the one that seems most like the punishment Raoul has already put me through. I'll walk through fire for all to witness. My husband throws his hands up in surprise. For God's sake, don't burn yourself in a fire. But I wouldn't burn, I insist, because I'm not one of those women. No, no, but if you must do something, I would have you go before the altar of Our Lady of Le Puy and swear for all to hear that you are innocent of these accusations I've heard, and that you've done me no wrong. Gladly. Let's go now. I turn, eager for this nightmare to end so easily. And then I want you to climb the pinnacle of Saint Michel and leap from the top to join the other sinners.
That was excellent, right at 3 minutes. I'm going to go in the chat and put in your connection so that people want to see more of this book, Our Lady's Troubadour. They can get it. That was excellent, Jessica. Wonderful.
Thank you.
All right, now we're going to travel from 10th century Spain to the 1890s to 1913 in the Far East with a naval thriller by Roger Crossland. Roger, I'm going to select you. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Can you unmute yourself? All right, Roger, take it away.
It is a dark, cold night. Skookum, a disgraced Korean tribute courier, is now a galley hand aboard a decrepit sidewheeler headed up the inside passage. Once he'd been a warrior, he must now find new alliances in his own place in the world if he is to achieve retribution and redemption. At this moment, he's on the lam and Alaska bound. This sidewheeler had been a ferry, but her shipyard had never intended her for an open ocean cruising. In common with the ferry's passengers, Skookum shares a desire for gold, but unlike the others, he plans to pay off a great debt. Daily, since he lost that tribute shipment in China, he recites the Korean proverb, "Even if the sky falls on you, there is a hole in which you can escape." Looking into the shadows below, Yi sees a man in a red and black Mackinaw coat on the main deck that he remembers seeing before. That man had come aboard as part of a larger group of 5, perhaps 6, whose general similarity of appearance made Yi believe they were related. They were unremarkable, except for an air of surliness that discouraged small talk. With 2 deft gestures, the Mackinaw man moves his hand across the throats of a white-haired man and a man in a frock jacket, both leaning on the taffrail. Both victims spasm and slump over the rail. The Mackinaw man feigns consoling pats while he empties their pockets. Then he topples them individually over the rail. The Mackinaw man's comrades flood the fan rail from nowhere, and they each clap him on the shoulder. Skookum Yi knows the meaning of a double slice across the throat. He also knows there's little justice in Alaska. On the ship, Yi is known as Snowfall, a nickname bestowed when he promised he'd keep the galley clean, white, like snow from sky. He knows this nickname has been granted jokingly, but it suggests a degree of acceptance. Humor is as useful as an edged weapon when it comes to survival. Humor can turn a foreigner into a non-threatening fellow traveler. But now acceptance means survival. He needs to collect many more acceptance markers before he dares confront murder or oppression. Yi had been a man of action once, a man who guarded fortunes in silver and gold. Yet on this side of the Pacific, he feels frail and inconsequential.
Excellent. Roger, that was lovely. I'm going to put your links into our chat so people can look you up. I think there's also an interview with you in this selection too. So if people want to see more of that, they can. All right, Roger, congratulations. That was fabulous.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, now we get to travel from an East naval thriller to 6th century France with Catherine Butterfield. Let's see, here you go. Oh, where do you go here?
It's actually 16th century France,
Thank you, yes.
and this is the book.
All right, Catherine, go ahead.
5 May 1581, Perigord. Our journey must be cursed. First the rain, buckets of it, for 3 days, even though Nostradamus assured Mother the skies would be clear. And when the rains finally stopped, it became so hot that one of our bishops collapsed whilst carrying his saintly relic. I suppose walking for 100 miles next to a royal procession isn't easy, but do they not practice? Perhaps they should have found a younger bishop. From the window of my litter, I can see Mother pacing back and forth impatiently as they attempt to revive the old fellow. It's against all protocol for her to leave her litter unmasked, but that's Mother. She probably thinks it will attract God's attention to the situation if Catherine de' Medici displays her face to the heavens. Plutarch, my favorite author, writes, "What we achieve inwardly would change outward reality." I am very attracted to that notion and am desperately trying to achieve an inner calm to alter the fact that Mother is screeching orders outside my litter. Why is she so excitable? I have heard people suggest, behind closed doors, of course, that Mother is a witch. And it's true, she does make it easy to draw such unpleasant conclusions. Her unruly hair, piercing black eyes, and hooked nose terrified me as a child. Add to that the fact that she frequently mutters dark imprecations in Italian, a language few at court have bothered to learn, and it's no wonder they connect her to the dark arts. I shall attempt to rise above the commotion taking place outside my litter to reflect on the circumstances that have brought me to this point. The seeds of our journey were planted over a month ago. It was a rainy day, but my ladies and I were having the loveliest afternoon inside the Louvre Palace. Madame de Tournon was braiding and bejeweling my hair for the ball that night, and Lady Agatha was singing a sweet chanson whilst Ladies Rosalind and Maria practiced dance steps together. The room was filled with fresh roses, the scent of which rendered me slightly drowsy and filled me with a sense of well-being. Does any other flower have that delicious effect? I think not. There was much to look forward to, with the promise of an evening's entertainment lying ahead. Suddenly, the doors were thrown open, and my mother marched furiously into the room, accompanied by Charles, who should have entered first as he is king, but Mother was too angry to remember that. My ladies jumped up and curtsied, but Mother pushed past them and placed herself face to face with me, fairly quivering with rage. Charles turned to my ladies and bellowed as best he could in a voice that had only recently broken with adolescence. "Leave us!" They all hurried from the room, but I'm quite sure they stood by the door to listen to the humiliation that was about to unfold.
Excellent. That was like having an audiobook performance. All right, I'm going to put your little links to your books here in our thread. That was fabulous. Thank you. Perfect. And at the end, if we can hold that up again, that'd be fantastic. All right, wonderful. All right, now we go to Harold Emanuel, to Jewish life in the late 19th century in Manhattan. Where are you? Here you are. Let's see.
Okay.
All right, take it away, Harold.
Nellie and her husband David are on the Lusitania in May 1915. Dorothy and Beatrice are friends they met on the ship. A deafening explosion rocked the Lusitania, followed by another in less than a minute. Nellie was knocked off her feet and flung against the bulkhead. Dorothy landed next to her. Water filled with ashes and soot poured over the railing and doused the two women. What? Nellie shouted. A torpedo, Dorothy screamed. It must be a torpedo. The two women tried to stand, but were knocked down by a deck chair. David, Nellie shouted. I've got to find David. She ran to the cabin hallway door. People were streaming out. She pushed her way in and headed toward her stateroom. She hoped David would also head there. The ship's list to its starboard side made it difficult to stand. She climbed the stairs to C deck and walked toward the cabin. She stepped on glass when she entered the cabin. The pothole was punctured. A wood fragment had fallen onto the bed. A segment of the ceiling had collapsed, and something she recognized as life jackets had fallen out. She put one on, not sure she had done it correctly, and took one for David. She found paper and penned a note to her husband, telling him to look for her on the deck. She hoped he would find it. Nellie retraced her steps toward the deck. She was 10 feet from the cabin when the lights went out. Screams echoed off the walls. After feeling her way forward another 15 feet, she found the scream's source. An elevator was stuck between floors, unable to move people. People banged on the elevator gates, but they didn't budge. Passengers were trapped in a steel cage. No crew members were there to help. Nellie reached the stairs and descended to the bulkhead door. David, Nellie shouted as she exited onto the deck and saw her husband rush toward her. They hugged. They were both flung against the rail as the ship continued to list. She gave him the life jacket and helped him put it on. My children, Beatrice shouted. Her eyes were wide open, her hand shaking as she ran toward the bulkhead door. They're in the ship's nursery play area. I've got to find them. Nellie took Beatrice's hand. We'll help you. They stumbled toward the listing deck, banging against the railing as the ship's starboard side tilted further toward the Celtic Sea. Water rushed out of the door. They couldn't get in the hallway. Beatrice bowed her head and placed her hands on her face and cried.
Oh, Harold, that was lovely. Terrifying, but lovely. Yes, you even were under time. So I'm going to put your links in our chat thread. Congratulations, that was terrific. Let me see now, make sure that you are muted. All right, so now we're going to go from Harold to Kathy to 6th century Peru. All right, Kathy, can you unmute yourself?
I got a little over eager. Late 6th century, Nazca Valley, Atacama Desert, western coast of South America. Even from here, I can see a cheek striding up our valley. The torches cast shadows off his staff, with his feathers and foxtails swaying. Light glistens across his golden mask as drums begin to echo up and down the valley, letting everyone know the priests are coming to claim my grandmother's head. Leaving the outside lamps dark, I slip back into the house and place an extra lamp next to my mother. They are in the valley, I say. She doesn't look up, just continues preparing my grandmother, my Paya Kuyai, for burial. She nods to the basket of bracelets. I pick out Kuyai's favorites and arrange them on her arm. I linger over the orca tattoo on her wrist. It's identical to mine, except that Kuyai's orca is as dry and lifeless as our riverbeds, while mine glistens with sweat and quivers with anger. The shaking travels to my lips and unclenches my jaw. How can you let them do this? I blurt out. She belongs here. Mother says nothing. Kuyai died last night, I remind her. It's a full day's walk to the temple, yet their runner was here before midday. How did they find out so fast? Mother brushes a line of red cinnabar powder across Kuyai's forehead. When she finally speaks, all she says is, I don't know, Batya. I don't know. The drums begin a slow dirge. Each beat deepens the hole in my heart. Kuyai is gone. Kuyai is gone. Kuyai is gone. The great heart at the center of my days is gone. I have lost the hands that healed me when I was hurt, fixed me when I was broken, soothed me when I was sad. My teacher has left me before I have learned all she had to teach. My kuyai, my paya, more mother to me than Keika who bore me. It was kuyai who marked me from birth, who forbade them from binding my head, who promised me I would be glad of it one day, but that day has not come, and kuyai is gone. We haven't much time, my mother says, her voice strangely vacant. I don't like her eerie calm. I want to shake her, wake her, make her see. If Paya Kuyai's head is to become an umanka, it should stay here with her family, not the priests, I continue. Do you really believe it is the will of the gods that her head go to the temple? Mother won't look at me. I can't stop myself. It's more like the will of a chief. Call it the owl.
Kathy, that was lovely. Very moving. Very moving. I can't wait to ask you questions about your research on this. Okay, that was great. Okay, so we got Kathy. Our next contestant is Peter. Hi, Peter. Let me get you pinned and I'll set up here. All right, you look great. And take it away.
Thank you. Quickening his pace, Yavin rounded the familiar bend, signaling he'd soon be nearing his village. The sun had come up above the horizon now. Fresh dew sparkled the low-lying vegetation, refracting the sun's rays in quick flashes of colored light, like so many jewels scattered across the crisp, clean forest floor. As he neared, Yavin heard what at first he took to be the sound of waking chatter and bustle from his village. But as he drew close, something didn't feel right. Things didn't sound normal. He heard yelling, screaming, and unusual voices. Heavy objects cracked and thumped. Men of his village shouted urgently. Women and children screamed. An explosion ripped the air. He smelled smoke, not the sort that came from the morning fires, but different, acrid, and much thicker. Slowing his pace, his peaceful feeling quickly became replaced with mounting fear and anxiety. Something is terribly wrong. Adrenaline coursed through his veins as he crept slowly along the remaining section of trail. Indistinct shadows of men flashed and darted past open spaces in the foliage. Terrified shrieks erupted from his tranquil village. Leaving the trail, Yavin hid in the bush at the edge of the clearing. Men he'd never seen before swarmed through the huts, tackling everyone. Friends, mothers, fathers, uncles, elders, all of them. Fire and smoke leapt through thatched roofs. Some of the village men desperately tried to protect the others. He looked over to his family's hut and saw his father, whom he'd never known to be a fighter, madly wield his hoe at an attacker. His father hit the man, knocking him to the ground. Suddenly from behind, a heavy knife fell, slicing deeply into his father's shoulder. Yavin knelt, paralyzed with fear, as his father fell to the ground, blood running heavily from the wound. He looked on helplessly as his father tried to roll over and face his attacker. But the large blade came down again and again, indiscriminately slashing his father until he lay still, a dark crimson ring blooming across the dirt. His mother screamed. She was being dragged, bruised and dirty, by her hair. His 4-year-old sister, Ifateo, cried hysterically as she too was pulled along by one arm. It was too much for his 12-year-old eyes. Yavin couldn't move for the terror he felt. What is happening? A sudden jolt knocked him on his side, a massive boot landing heavily on his neck. He hadn't heard or seen the man approach from his left. He looked up to see a pale face ringed in matted beard. It bristled with menace, teeth clenched, eyes glaring like a wild beast. This man was a demon, like nothing Yavin had ever seen before. His hair was tan and his skin white, almost the shade of the moon. The man jerked him to his feet, painfully twisting his arm behind his back. He tried to resist, but the man's grip was like iron. He was much too strong. Yavin fought for his footing, thorns tearing at his flesh as he was dragged roughly from the bush. This is my book.
That was certainly dramatic. Thank you so much. That's a difficult passage to read. You did it very well.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so now we're going to go on to Sherry Christie to early 20th century New York City.
Yes, I write about the perilous first century Rome. And I'm going to read from chapter 1 of my book, Amber Road, which is actually the second book in a trilogy. From chapter 1, which is called Oathbreaker. Nearly 3 months, and still she had not returned. If not for that brave, passionate, unpredictable girl, I would have been a state official appointed by my bosom friend Caligula Caesar, getting fat from bribes and lavish dinner parties. I would have been the cosseted young heir of my noble family, sharing our old house on the Palatine with no familiar slaves, an influential and autocratic father, a mother who acquired factories and olive oil mills as other matrons collect jewels, a twin sister ignominiously divorced for childlessness, and an urn full of ashes that had been my brother, who killed himself to escape dishonor. I would have been Marcus Licinius Carina, rich and popular, with my feet set on the path to the Senate, and perhaps one day a consulship. Now I was none of these things. Instead, I was an ex-army officer with a traitor's name, drinking away the weight from my beloved in a squalid taberna in a dusty little outpost in a province hundreds of miles from Rome. And at the moment, I might have a problem. When off duty, soldiers usually head for the nearest brothel or swill hole. Why these legionaries from the 15th had wandered to the most distant edge of town was a mystery. But even out of uniform, there was no mistaking the boast in their swagger. We are the heroes protecting you, ungrateful rabble, from the barbarian hordes. Kiss our stinking feet. The first of them loomed up in the alley outside. Enough of the spring twilight was left to show mosquitoes hovering around his close-cropped hair. He rapped a coin on the open counter of the taberna. Jug of wine, best you got. Aye, pour us the 40-year Falernian, added another man behind him. They cackled. The tabernarius hastily uncapped one of the countertop wells and ladled wine into a jug. No one around here wanted to rile a soldier. I turned back to my own cup. They were unlikely to recognize me, slouched over a table inside the darkening wine shop, unless they came in. Move, you two, said another voice. I need to fix this buggery boot nail. And the third one came in. He bumped against the customer, swore, and upended the man's bench, dumping him on the dirt floor. And I'll have this table, thanks. He yanked it toward himself, spilling a partly full cup. The dispossessed drinker slunk away without complaint. Here, brothers. The other two stumbled in, cursing. Stinks like Hades' bunghole in here. The small taberna was already so crowded there was hardly room to swat a fly. The soldiers choked it like 6 toes in a boot. I hunched over, shielding my face with a hand. With luck, I would be ignored. You, get up, I want your seat. I pretended not to hear. 7 months earlier, I had been a hero, rallying ambushed troops to end a Germanic uprising. I did not want to find out what the Legion thought of me now. Are you deaf? Get up, I said. I lifted my head slowly, saw the man's hairy calves and second-best boots. Laces knotted where they had broken. Then the patched tunic, faded but recognizably reddish. Ropey arms blotched with tattoos and grime. A sneer on an ill-shaven face that I did not think I knew. It is hard, though, to recall one face out of several thousand. A German. His hand.
I'm going to have to cut you off here. I'm so
Very
sorry.
good.
We went a little over 3 minutes, but you were so
Okay.
good with the
That's the rest of it.
accents. Yes. And I will post your book here in the thread. And thank you for persevering through all that technical hoo-ha. Kudos to you.
Thank you.
All right, let's head over to Allison. Here we go.
Hello.
Hi, Allison. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. Perfect. Starting now.
This is a nonfiction book I wrote that was published in 2002 about the first woman filmmaker, and now I'm writing a. This was a study of her films, and now I'm writing her life story in a novelized form. So Paris, 1897. The last photograph is the one we took of the bazaar from above. The medieval Parisian street created out of canvas and paper mache. I tapped the image. We should go back with a movie camera, film the ladies. Monsieur Delay is excited by the idea. We load a film camera and a tripod into a carriage and head toward the former military barracks. I smell it long before we reach it. Then I see it. Black, acrid smoke streaming out of the windows, a thick, angry column curling away from the roof. The bazaar is on fire. Sound slows and distorts, shouts, screams, each one like a blow. Embers land on my dress, my hair. The smell of sulfur, of burning wood, of charred flesh flowed toward me, riding wave after wave of unbearable heat. The main entrance to the bazaar is now the entrance to hell. A mass of people is stuck in the door frame. They try to claw over each other like trapped rats that got wedged in. My mother is in there too. I run toward the entrance. Delay calls after me, but I ignore him. People run back and forth, wild. I join the throng on the street, trying to pull out the people trapped in the main doorway, their arms and heads fluttering uselessly. I grab an arm and pull, but it's no use. Everyone in the doorway is trapped. I search their faces, but the face I'm looking for isn't there. Mother! But there's no answer. I rush around to the other end of the bazaar. The screams are louder here. Sharp wells reverberate among muffled cries for help, punctuated by cracks as part of the roof gives way and collapses. I look for a break in the crowd, some way to get through, but it's impossible. Then I remember what I saw through the keyhole in the back door of the barracks yesterday, a weed-choked lot and the windows of the Hotel du Palais. I run into the swanky establishment, ignoring the stares of the hotel guests, find my way to the dining room, and then into the kitchen. The kitchen smells of food, but no one is cooking. Instead, men in aprons and men in waiter uniforms are at the windows, reaching for the outstretched arms and hands. The baker grasps an arm firmly and pulls a woman in. She falls to the floor, and he leaves her there with others and reaches for the next one. I look at the women on the floor, and then I go to the window and help a waiter pull another woman inside. But the woman is not my mother. Mother, mother, I keep calling, even as smoke fills my lungs. And then there she is, her face black with soot, her hair matted. I help pull her to safety. Her dress is torn, discolored, ruined. She sways. Alice, my little Alice. She waves her hand over her head. The fire was alive, like a serpent. It slithered along the canopy over our heads. It caught the frame. It jumped from draperies to the curtains to women's dresses.
Okay, I'm so sorry to cut you off, but we are a little bit over with you. It was such a dramatic scene, but you did that really well. That was wonderful, Allison. I'm going to put your information in our thread. Kudos to you, my dear. All right, now we're going to go on to Cynthia. Hey, Cynthia.
Hello.
All right. I'm going to give you 3 minutes starting now.
The Last Whaler opens on June 18th, 1947. Tor Handelin, a beluga whaler, has returned to his remote Arctic whaling station to relive a life-changing moment. 10 years earlier, he and his wife Astrid became stranded at the station over the long polar winter when the ice closed the fjord earlier than usual. Tor opens the novel with the following passage. Even on this desolate stretch of stony Arctic shore, on the archipelago Svalbard, halfway between the northern coast of Norway and the North Pole, I must tell you there are consolations. Here, the sun shines day and night from mid-April to late August. Yet the summer solstice, the day of no night, is also the moment the sun begins its retreat. Only the seasoned Arctic dweller would notice the minute differences in the sunlight's quality on either side of the solstice, the fulcrum upon which the season turns. Time and space converge, balance for a moment, then reel apart. Norwegians celebrate Midsummer's Eve by lighting a bonfire around which we dance and drink and sing. But like everything else in life, our joy comes tempered with the knowledge that sadness nips at our heels, always. The bonfire reminds us that the sun is once again slowly sinking down, that in time we'll endure the companion days of no day. Perhaps if on that evening by the bay, Astrid and I had thought of this precarious balance, this tipping point between the sun's ascension and declination, we would have felt the undertow that foretold the time to come. I want to relive that moment on the beach, the evening of our Midsummer's Eve celebration, 23 June 1937, to reach into time and space and wrench us back, to go forward from that instant and retrace with these words, mine and hers, the journey down shore from this whaling station to our private retreat at Haven. I want to add my thoughts to the weathered leather folio I hold in my hands, bulging with Astrid's letters to our son Burke, written in her elegant cursive, to bind my words to hers, present and past counterpointed, as if words themselves will finally solve the riddle of my wife, as if black marks on these white pages could bring her back, as if a wash of ink will absolve me of my sins.
Oh, Cynthia, that was lovely. So poetic.
Why is it backwards?
It's backwards for you. It mirrors.
Yeah, okay.
We can see it, right? Don't worry. All right, we'll hold it up again at the end. All right. Okay, now we're going to jump to Florence. She writes in the 20th century. Let me find our Florence here. You've got 3 minutes. Take it away.
Street Corner Dreams is a novel between the world wars. Begins in 1914 when Golda's pregnant sister dies giving birth to her son on the ship taking them to New York, leaving Golda to meet her brother-in-law Ben with the infant. This scene takes place in the apartment of Ben's cousin, where he lives. One morning, cousin Sura cocked her head, said to Golda, "So, has he asked you yet?" "Asked me what?" Cousin Sura smiled. "To marry." Golda's mouth dropped open. "No, he hasn't." She shook her head. Her heart beat hard. She couldn't marry Ben. He didn't love her. She didn't love him. She'd never yearned to be a wife and mother. But in the old country, what else was there? At home, the small town rules she was bound by were get married, have children. But in this new country, many women worked in business. Golda wanted to learn English so she could work like those women, be smartly dressed, and become an independent American. How could she do that? Desert this infant, leave him to Ben. What would Ben do? Cousin Sura had talked about an orphanage. How could she let her sister's son be taken to an orphanage if she could prevent it? Her heart sank and she shivered. Do people really take their children to orphanages? She whispered. Better an orphanage than starving. People do terrible things when they are desperate. Men leave their families, even mothers leave. I know one whose husband died and she left her son with a neighbor. He joined a gang and turned to crime and was killed. You are not so desperate. You have choices. Golda felt the walls closing in. All the choices came to her, and none except one seemed worthy. In her village, when a man was widowed with a child, he would marry his dead wife's single sister. It was a mitzvah for the sister to marry him and raise her sister's child. Golda felt trapped. She could not support herself. Her embroidery was a side business, not a trade. All the dreams she'd had as a girl of escaping the life that was laid out before her were just that, dreams. She closed her eyes, thoughts swirling. Would Esther want me to marry Ben? Is he going to ask me to marry? Yes. Well, he hasn't yet. Maybe he won't. He will, soon. And what will you say? Golda breathed. If I say no, where will I go? Cousin Sura will not let me stay here. If I say yes, I will be married, and my life will no longer be my own. A deep sigh escaped her lips. If Ben asks me, I need an answer. and with all the scurrying thoughts in her head, there was only one answer that solved all the problems, and she would have to say it. Yes.
Poor Golda, that's a terrible choice. We'll have to read the book to find out what happens. Excellent. I'll put your information here in the thread. Fabulous. All right, now we're going to go to our very last reader. We have Helen. Let me find you. Here we are. All right, Helen. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right. I'm going to start your timer now. Go ahead.
Okay. I see I'm not pinned though, so can you see my book?
You're pinned.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I don't see myself. Sorry. So you'll notice here that my last name is the same name as my character's name, and she was my great grandmother. And here she is in church with her fiance, applying to set a date for their wedding. The parson turned to Annette, raising an eyebrow and questioned, "Your name, miss?" "Annette Lundström." He wet his finger again as he turned the pages. L, here we have. He stopped mid-sentence and gave Annette a sharp look. "Did you say your name is Annette Lundström?" "Yes." "Moved from Hardeberga, July 1889? "Yes." "And Miss Lundström, Mr. Henriksson has forgiven you for your sin?" Annette stared at him, speechless. "Her sin?" Yoon asked, incredulously, his voice crisp. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean." He reached for her hand under the table and clasped it firmly. "Well, it appears that this woman had a child born on the 4th of October, 1889, father unknown. I hope and pray that Miss Lundström has discussed this with you," the parson said, just as crisply. Then he cleared his throat. Everything went still, and there was a ringing sound in her ears. The parson's words reverberated and hung as a physical presence in the room, spoken as if she wasn't there. This woman had a child. This woman. Father unknown. She blushed. Yoon turned toward her slowly. She felt his eyes burning into the side of her face. He didn't remove his hand, but it had gone limp in hers. She was going to meet his gaze when the parson closed the book and sighed deeply. "So I gather she hasn't told you," he said. She would never forget the sound of trousers sliding on wood as Yoon moved away from her. The parson put his hand on his shoulder and led him to the corner of the room. Yoon turned to look at her for a moment, then turned back to the parson, who was now speaking in hushed tones, but she heard most of it, and it was enough. "I'm sorry. Deceived. A sin. She doesn't even know the father. Brides are supposed to be virgins. There's a law." Annette rose to her feet. Without looking back, she moved quickly through the room and the waiting area, pushed the door open, and stepped out into the sunny summer day.
Oh, that was lovely. Not a lovely
you.
story, but really effective.
Thank you.
Get your information here in there. All right. Congratulations, everybody. Before we head on over to this question and answer, can I ask everybody to take their book and put it up next to your face? I'd like to take a nice screenshot. We'll have it on camera too, but this will be a nice way. Harold, do you have a book with you too?
Oh, yeah, I gotta get it. 1 second.
Okay, 2 seconds, everybody. I always love this tradition. It's really nice to have a book in print that you can hold up.
There we go. Yep.
There you go. Oh, this is fabulous. All right. We got it. Perfect. All right. Thanks, everybody. So now we're just going to go into a very, very quick question and answer, because I think you've all read so well, so many different genres and so many different voices. But I'd first like to start off with Jessica, being in Spain. Let me see if I can find you. Is she still here?
Hello.
There you are. Jessica, I just want to ask, I mean, I've read several of your books set in Spain. Did you become interested in these stories before you moved to Spain, or is this a passion that started once you were there?
Absolutely. The stories are from a set of manuscripts called the Cantigas de Santa Maria. And they're the largest collection of miracles by the Virgin Mary from the Middle Ages. And they have music and pictures, and they're just a wonderful multimedia experience. And I've been fascinated with them for a very long time. I, in fact, wrote my doctoral dissertation about them. So long before I came to live in Spain. So, and this book was written because I thought it would be a lot of fun, a really fun way to pay tribute to the 800th anniversary of the birth of the king who had these manuscripts made.
That's fascinating. You're like the historian of this lore for us when we come and visit you in Spain. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Roger, I'd like to ask you, your book is so interesting about your writing and with your family. I understand that you were recently honored for your service and charitable work by the International Templars Order. Was that something that was part of your research, or is this just an ongoing interest you have going on too?
I got the international award, but I'm not sure what your question is.
Well, is this interest in the Templars, is that related to your research with your military book?
Actually not.
Ah, I see.
It's not, but I hang around with a lot of veterans who are interested in it. I actually, now that I've been recognized, I've been given a leadership position. But the group I'm in is and has won this award are from a whole range of conflicts and military backgrounds.
All right, Catherine, I have a question for you.
The family.
Catherine, how did you get interested in 16th century France? What about that environment made you want to write this wonderfully poetic story?
I was in an artist's retreat in Nérac, France, and the host took us out to dinner, and we were dining right next to the ruins of a castle. And he told us that it was used by the man who went on to be Henry IV of France and his wife, Marguerite de Valois. And I didn't know anything really about either of them and did some research, thinking at first that Henry was going to be my guy. But then I found the memoirs of Marguerite. And I mean, it was kind of heavy sledding. It was Gutenberg Press, and it was translated from the Old French. But I got a sense of who she was very strongly, even reading these memoirs. And it felt like she was inhabiting me as I walked around Nérac. I felt as if she were there, helping me put this story together. It was very inspirational.
So basically, she possessed you and you're telling her story.
She possessed me. Yes, she did. She's been urging me on.
All right, Harold,
Otherwise, I would never have taken an interest.
That's right. So Harold, I love this photograph, but I'm also really interested. You post such terrific historical information on our Facebook page. How do you go about researching this period of time?
I pick various historical events. My book covers a period of about 40 years of a family. And in the book, my characters interact with many historical figures and many historical events. And so when I was researching, for example, this section on the Lusitania, I found a book called Lusitania. And I do a lot of reading of nonfiction. And this particular book that I read, and anybody's interested in the whole area of the Lusitania, I recommend it because it did talk about a lot of the people. So the two people that I included, their friends, Dorothy and Beatrice were both actual people on the Lusitania, and just do a lot of nonfiction reading on the historical areas that I write about.
Well, thank you very much, because Harold, your stuff that you post is just absolutely fascinating, and you're really giving us great other things to read in addition to your book. So Kathy, I want to ask you, where are you? Let's see. There you are. Thank you for waving. That always helps. You have such a fascinating title about this Peruvian culture. How did you become interested in that?
Well, my husband is from Peru, and I lived there for about 20 years until we moved back about 5 years ago to the U.S. And one of the things that struck me living in Peru was how outside of Peru, if not that many people know much of Peruvian history or culture, but they might have heard of the Incas. Everyone associates Peru with the Incas, but they were known because there was no writing before that. So the Spaniards, when they came, it was the Inca Empire that they wrote about. There were just so many fascinating cultures long before the Incas that they had incorporated bits and pieces. And in traveling around Peru, I just was fascinated by the Nazca lines and the Nazca culture and the pottery and the iconography. And then a couple of things just really caught my attention about them. Some of the things about the culture, the severed heads, which all the archaeologists were debating whether or not it was ancestor worship or whether it was trophies and warfare related. And so I started interviewing anthropologists, archaeologists, looking for, traces of some of that kind of earth honoring culture and traditions in modern times. And I just got possessed also in a sense, and trying to explain some of the things and all the theories about how the lines in the deserts, that you can only see from the air, what were they for, et cetera. And they were very ritual and ceremonial oriented. So I just wanted to immerse myself in that world and try to create a world that was plausible, but still have a sense of that magic in between worlds kind of thing. Because you look at their pottery and they've got all these kinds of weird flying creatures, with wings and claws and feline, and the cosmology is just fascinating. And so I tried to make sense of it, make something plausible, and also immerse myself in that whole mythological world. And that's what I did with Batya.
Well, certainly living there for 20 years and being married to somebody from Peru is a very grounding source of material.
That's very exciting.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Now, Peter, let's find Peter. All right. Can you unmute yourself? This is Zoe. Oh, that's perfect. We're moving along. That was a very moving chapter you read about your enslaved protagonist. This is such a terrible story of going from Africa to Barbados to South Carolina. Is this based on a real person in history, Peter?
No, actually, there aren't very many records passed down by the enslaved because they weren't, allowed to read and write and didn't have time to do so, or the materials or anything else. And so most of the stories are by word of mouth and not really available. So I had to imagine a character and then try to recreate what the experience might have been like from his perspective.
And how did you come up with your character's name?
Yavin is it's a name that was used in Africa by African tribes at that period of time, and which is in the 1700s, by the way. And a lot of their cultural influences at that period were being influenced by Arabic, means. Muslim religion was definitely encroaching on their tribal spiritual habits, as well as a lot of other religions. And so I believe it's a name that is probably Arabic in origin.
Well, that's fascinating. Thank you so much. It's such a great opening world of all these cultures that were part of this thread that you knit together. Sherry, I would like to talk to you. Let me see if I can, once again, here we are. And you have your mic on, so we're doing great. Sherry, can you tell me, what was the Amber Road? Was it an actual thing that happened in history? A place?
It actually was a trading route, which went all the way from Aquileia, which was at the head of the Adriatic Sea, to the Baltic. And it was the primary trade route for amber, which was found on the shores of the Baltic. And then traders would bring it all the way down across what is now Hungary, Austria, and so forth, to the head of the Adriatic, where it would eventually go to Rome and be made into jewelry. It was very precious at the time, and was often made into jewelry. So the place where it crossed, where the Amber Road crossed the Danube, was actually the border of the Roman Empire. And so there was a fortress there, and that's where the main character is situated during the excerpt that I read a moment ago.
That's great.
It was a dangerous place, but it was part of the Roman Empire's reaching out to areas beyond its own borders to facilitate trade.
Fabulous. We're learning so much here. It's like an international schooling here. And Allison, I'd love to talk to you about your protagonist, Alice Guy. Is it pronounced Blanchet?
Alice Guy.
Guy.
Yeah, and she wasn't Blanchet yet in the excerpt that I read.
How did you get interested in her?
I was a filmmaker myself, and 2 careers back, and I was looking for role models and looking for a female filmmaker role model, and I was shocked to discover that for the first years of film history, there was only one, Alice Guy, who halfway through her career married and became Alice Guy Blanchet, but she continued making films. She had a 28-year career.
And she came up with the whole concept of being a movie director. Is that right?
Right. She did. She always had a cameraman because since she was female, no one, they weren't that heavy at that time, but she also compared making movies to like charades. So had to be directed. The actors, she was focused on the actors being directed, but she knew a lot about cameras too.
Fantastic. It sounds like a wonderful protagonist. Now, Cynthia, let me find you. There we go. My question for you is that your book is told through, is it right that it's told through 2 different points of view in the book?
Yes, it's a dual narrative.
And was that a difficult perspective to take on, or did you enjoy doing that?
I hated it.
I
resisted. I wrote the first 80 pages in Tor Handelin's point of view. And his wife, Astrid, is an important part of the story. And I just resisted and resisted putting her voice in there, not because I didn't love her as a character, but just I knew the difficulty of trying to manage 2 different perspectives across multiple time frames. And one day, and I couldn't figure out exactly how to write her. And one day, and you find this out early on, I'm not giving anything away, Burke, who I referenced, has died a year before they go on their trip, and their marriage has become strained, and they're hoping with her along for the whaling season, it'll help, bring them back together. And so what I decided one day was if I wrote her perspective as a series of letters to her son, who she's really still struggling to overcome his death. And so I sat and I wrote a letter, and then I wrote another letter, and I thought, I can do this. And that's how the second narrative erupted. It still was really, really difficult to manage, especially because when I started, knew very little about the Arctic, about whaling, about anything I needed to know about. So,
well, if Jane Austen can use letters, you can too. And maybe that'll be a subject for one of our future events, is that we talk about writing in dual perspective, because that's so tricky. Lovely topic though. Florence, here we go. Let's unmute you. My question for you is this marriage that Gold has to, agree to with this. Is it the mafia that's in Brooklyn? Is that the tribe that she's marrying into?
No. She's
No?
not marrying into it. No.
Oh, I see.
She's marrying a good, if not strong man. But the book is about the growth of the gangs in Brooklyn and Lower Manhattan and how they impacted the poor immigrants. During that time, which was between World War I and World War II, you remember there was prohibition, which grew the gangs to an enormous power. And one of the characters in the family gets pulled into it. I won't tell you why, because it's part of the suspense of the book. But it did impact the families. It came from my daughter called me and told me that she was doing genealogical research, and she discovered that my mother had a first cousin who was in the gangs and was subsequently murdered. Big family secret, of course. I never knew it. And that was the beginning of my research into that time and the telling of this particular story.
Boy, that's going to be better than finding your roots to find that out.
Which is also written in four perspectives. So
that's tricky as well, but fascinating. And for our very last reader, we're going to turn our attention to Helen. Helen, your subject matter about these unwed mothers in Sweden and the true story of infants, how do you pronounce that? Infanticide?
Oh, infanticide, you can say. Yeah, it is part of the story as well. Yeah, it is part of that. It's just there was no access to contraceptives, and it was not accepted to have sexual relations if you weren't married. So women were very desperate. And my great-grandmother was one of the women who had many secrets that my dad didn't even know. And that's what got me very interested in this time period and the story.
Was it a well-known situation there, or was it a secret that the communities kept covering it up?
Well, I think most people tried to cover it up, or they lived stigmatized because you were, it was a conservative Lutheran society at that time, and you were supposed to be married to have children. That's the way it was. And if you didn't, it was very shameful. And there was even a rumor that said that women who were not married and didn't tell other people that they had had a child out of wedlock, if they got near another person's baby, that child could become bow-legged. And it's, we know it's vitamin D deficiency, but in the 19th century, people didn't know, and people were also wrapping their babies a lot, and they were held indoors, so there were all kinds of reasons. But when you don't understand and you don't know science, this, made it much worse for women. And that's what I wanted to write about, because I wanted to give my great-grandmother a voice, because she had more children than my dad knew, and not with the same father. And so I did some research as well and learned how many she had, which I'm not going to tell you because that'll spoil the plot. And also my other character, Hannah, she was an activist. And for me, it's important to think about that women who have the means can be activists. But if you don't have the means, and if you're struggling feeding your children and you're not welcome in society, it's very hard to take on that fight. So I also have two characters, and the story is told from two perspectives, two different women, and with different opinions on contraceptives and suffrage and all of this.
That's fascinating. Thank you so much, Helen.
Thank you.
I really have to hand it up to you authors. You did a spectacular job today reading your books and talking about it. We'll be putting this recording on our website. And certainly we will be putting this in our Facebook chat, where everybody can find your books. We'll be talking it up. But thank you so much for participating in this open mic.
That concludes our program. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. You can find out more about the New York City chapter of the Historical Novel Society at our website, or contact us at info@hnsnyc.org. And finally, please consider supporting our volunteer panelists and hosts. You can contact them at their websites in the description. Thanks for joining us.